Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, if you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.26 for our 2026 fundraising campaign. Visit the Film Florida merchandise page at filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. All merchandise proceeds go to the Film Florida Filmmaker Grant and Scholarship Fund. Andrew Byrd is an accomplished film producer with extensive experience in budgeting, scheduling, and production management, while bringing both creative insight and operational efficiency to every project. Specializing in feature films, award-winning festival shorts, and select TV pilots, Andrew's work has been licensed to major distributors and platforms including HBO, Showtime, Hulu, Tubi, Comcast, Roku, and Amazon Prime, demonstrating both commercial appeal and wide audience reach. Andrew has been a member of the Producers Guild of America since 2015 and currently teaches pre-production in Florida, where he shares his industry experience and passion for independent storytelling with the next generation of filmmakers. We talk all of this and more on this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Here's my conversation with Andrew Byrd. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kind of start at the beginning. Give us your backstory. Help the audience get to know you a little bit.
Well, grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Go Buckeyes. Went to Bishop Reedy High School in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I really got my start on playing with video cameras and trying to figure out how to even make a skit at that point is really probably what the goal was. And then went to community college for a few years, finally wound up in Wright State University, which is now houses the Tom Hanks Film School or School of Film, whatever they're calling it now. Did that for a few years and then switched over to communications and got involved with the television station and had a really good mentor there named Dave Stoneburner, who I think is actually somewhere down here in Florida, maybe at UCF. And he really is the guy that helped me get into learning every position, whether it be lights or sound or, well, studio lighting, and then going out in the field and doing like E&Gs and things of that nature. So that kind of gave me the ability to do or learn how to do like one man show stuff. It was like, all right, you need to learn how to light, you need to learn how to do sound, you need to know how to operate the camera. And then after graduation, I substitute taught for a while because while I was in grad school, or no, undergrad rather, a light bulb went on and I was like, I think I want to be a college professor and I want to teach film. And really that was because a professor had annihilated my work. And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, you don't know how much work I actually put into this. And to be honest, he was probably right. So whether or not he knows that he turned on a light bulb, but he did. So that led me into pursuing my MFA. And I went to a school in Savannah, Georgia called Savannah College of Art and Design. And to be honest with you, up to that point, that's the hardest stuff I've ever done in my life. I was in my about 30. I think I turned 30 when I was in grad school. So, I was about 30, but it's pretty hard. But that taught me quite a bit as well. It really prepared me for the independent market. And I had some really good mentors at SCAD. For example, Andy Meyer, he did the Breakfast Club and Dead or Off Dead. And actually, one of his films, he won the Cannes Film Festival. Also, Michael Hoffstein, he's a camera guy, and he wrote one of the chapters in the cinematographer's Bible. So I was like, oh, I probably should listen to that guy. And Hank Moongene, who's another good one. He's a pretty wise dude. He was like a second AD in a lot of Hollywood movies. But I took that advice and took it with me into the industry. And then after graduate school, I moved to New York City And then while I was there, I worked with a couple of buds that I went to graduate school. So whoever's listening, if you're in grad school, start networking now. And then, we did like music videos, things like that. That led into getting a job with B&H where I traveled around the world dealing with military stuff. But while I did that, I was making a TV show on Belgian beers. So I guess I've always just been learning. And then now I'm here in Florida.
So you also studied under Roger Corman's legendary Corman Film School. What's one lesson that you carry into production every day now, or an experience that shaped the way you approach storytelling and production efficiency?
That's a great question. People ask me what it was like working with Corman and making movies for him. Is make it work. That's what I remember. Make it work. You've got $20. We're making a movie look like $1,000. So it was learning how to maximize locations, learning how to use 4 or 5 people on a crew to get a feature done, learning how to make 2 lights or 3 lights look like you have 5 lights, you know, using one camera, but maybe moving a little faster than I tell people to use for their setups. It is basically learning how to be efficient, learning how to stretch the dollar, learning how to be cool, calm, and collected.
Nice. Now, some of your credits include films like Blight, Death Count, Dino Gator, Zombie Apache. What draws you to a project? How do you know when to say this is going to be one that I actually want to pursue?
Well, that's also a good question. I've always wanted to teach. So basically, when it comes to making movies, if we have the money, I'll make it. If I like the script, I'll make it. I do a lot of mentoring. So, for example, on Blight, those were recent alumni from the college in which I teach. So they did really well in my pre-production class. And then once they got to graduation, they approached me with something, and I just mentored them on that. I told, this is what you need to do. I'll give you all the money and let's keep it within this budget range. And then we'll get it distributed in that way that will help you out. So that was really just to help the kids out to get some credits, right? And show them how to navigate the market. But when it comes to the larger ones, sometimes I'm just called in to consult, because I've worked with people before and they know I'm reliable and they know I'm not going to beat around the bush and they know I don't have anything to gain by, sweeping stuff under the rug. I'm a very like straight to the point person, which I think they appreciate.
Yeah.
I think honesty happens, it comes into play as well. So that might be on some of the other projects, but like with Zombie Apache, that's something where, I mean, the title tells you everything you need to know. I mean, how could that not be a good time? And we got the money for it, so that also helps.
Well, go into that a little bit more. What makes horror and kind of creature features such an enduring space for independent filmmakers?
Well, I could make a horror story about anything, and everybody has had some sort of experience with ghosts or ghost stories, or hearing bumps in the night. Now I sound like we're making a '50s movie. But monsters, you grew up with that. There's always something in your mind, the boogeyman, the person in the closet, the person under the bed. So that's pretty easy to pull off with implied horror. You don't necessarily need to show all of the guts and gores. And I'm gonna throw this out there. I'm not real big on cuss words, so you can also make those movies and hit a certain like the teenager market and not have a bunch of f bombs and GDs and b words and stuff like that. So I guess that's my answer for that.
No, that's actually a really good answer. I can understand that. Many of the films that you've been involved in include practical effects or stunt work and creature elements. From a producer's perspective, what's the secret to pulling off these ideas on indie-sized budgets?
The secret to pulling off all that stuff is number one, scheduling. Number two, rehearsal. I can't have a stunt unless I rehearse it. I mean, Zombie Apache, we had a fight scene near waterfalls and water and all this jazz and people falling down. ravines and things of that nature. But we rehearsed it, and we didn't rehearse it for an hour. We rehearsed it over a period of a couple weeks prior to getting out there. So that's important in rehearsal, as well as proper planning and making sure you have the budget to pull it off, making sure you have someone to pull it off. You don't want to hire someone that, I'm not going to say the name of the movie out there, but, we were on another movie where the makeup person sold the idea of being able to, this is a horror movie, being able to slice someone's neck open and then have a bunch of blood spurting out. But when it came down to it, we had like 4 hours of the person's setup where it's like, guys, a little long. And then when it was executed, it was so poorly done. But yeah, of course they got fired. But it all just comes down to double checking people. If someone's your friend and they say they can do it, maybe hire the person that you know can do it. All right. So hopefully that answers that question. I mean, planning, budgeting, scheduling. There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Now, since 2015, you've been a member of the Producers Guild of America. Tell us a bit more about this experience and what it's meant to you as a producer.
Well, it really just kind of proves to me that I know how to produce a movie. I guess that's really what it came down to, showing that hey, you understand how to break down a movie, how to schedule a movie, how to budget a movie, how to go from conception to completion, as well as marketing it either to festivals, but primarily getting the stuff on streaming services and making your budget back, as well as paying everyone. I think that's really what it comes down to. An acknowledgement. Has it helped me get jobs? Yeah, sure. It helps me consult on stuff. People take me a little more seriously. Like I tell my students, they come back to me all the time and they tell me, "Oh, I heard this, that, and that." And my first thing is, "Did you Google the source?" So I think that helps. Like being in the PGA, it's a little more get a little more respect. Because they're like, "All right, you've done it." Like, when I made Zombie Apache, I was using some pretty good people on that, and I Google everyone, so I know what people worked on. But the Grip team, they've got some big movies, but they're like, "Hey, we Googled you before we agreed to do this, and we saw that you had done this, this, and that." So yeah, it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Earning your wings, as they say. I mean, I've put in I'm going on like 20 plus years of making movies. So the movies before I got in and the movies after I got in, the budget's gone up and the distribution deals have gotten better.
Yeah. Now, as someone both on the inside of the industry making films, but also inside the classroom, as you mentioned, you're at Full Sail University. How do you see Florida's filmmaking community evolving over those years?
Well, I hope that we would get tax incentives back that would help keep the students in our state.
Yeah.
But I think it's getting better. I think that there are more opportunities. I think that, the state is talking about maybe getting some more tax incentives. I think that some local counties are talking about bringing in some tax incentives. You'd probably know more about that than I would.
Mhm.
But I know that my students are making a lot of movies. They're starting to make the shorts. Some of them have started to make future or features. I think that it could get better. I think that once we get the tax incentives and more students would be able to stay here and work on more independent stuff, even union stuff.
From our perspective, I mean, we give out grants and scholarships to students and, young filmmakers. Do you find that there is the acceptance of doing short films to kind of get your feet wet? I feel like few too many young filmmakers just want to jump right into a whole feature film. And I think they would be better served focusing on making a great 12-minute short as opposed to an endless feature film.
John, I couldn't agree with you more. I'll just go back to my experience. When I was in grad school, a kid had made a feature, and I was like, talking to one of my buddies, I'm like, I can't even fathom at that point making a feature. Like, how would you do that? The idea of you have to practice before you master something, well, they say you have to have 10,000 hours or something. if I was to have $1 million and I'm say, here, go make a movie, who am I going to give that money to? Am I going to give it that money to a kid that has an MFA or BA or BS or whatever, or am I going to give it to the kid that has made a couple, two, three, four short films that actually went to maybe second tier, first tier festivals? I mean, it's kind of hard to get in first tier festivals, but if you did some good second tier, I'm probably more apt to give it to him. Also, if you make a short film, you're going to learn how to, and it's all going to come down to pre-production stuff, manage time, manage people. You're going to learn how to manage the locations. You're going to learn how to manage a budget. You're going to learn how to spread out, and it's just a small thing. Well, it turns out to be a large thing sometimes, but you're going to be able to learn how to manage how much crafty you spread out on that crafty cable throughout the day. I know it seems, like, oh, it's a random thing to mention, but it's not,
Hmm.
right? So until you can master that, and it's funny, I was just grading some budgets from my students for their thesis films today, and one of them was for $147,000, and I realized that maybe that was from an example I gave them for a screenplay and treatment rate. But until they master the small stuff, then they should move on to this feature. And then like they say, you have to crawl before you walk.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew, as you mentioned, you teach pre-production. What's the biggest gap you see between the expectations that students have versus what's out there in the real world?
Oh, that's a great question. Number one, I would think that locations. They write movies that, and we kind of filter it out, but when they first get to us, they have, I have a nightclub, or I have a helicopter, or I have whatever. So they have all these great locations and events in their movies, but then when it comes down to it, they don't know where to get that location, or they don't know how to get helicopters, or they don't know how to set up a stunt, or they don't know how to get a permit for a firearm, or they never thought about what it would cost to rent something. And I see that a lot of the times they have, say they have 3 or 4 days to shoot, and they have all these shots, and a lot of them could be combined for the coverage. But then when it comes down to their first AD schedule, when I'm stressing, you should probably have 30 minutes per setup, because you're still learning. Yes, did I move faster on Zombie, Apache, and Blight? Yes, but I had more experienced teams. Again, this comes down to, you have to crawl before you walk. Is they don't schedule enough time. In an hour, they might have 10 different cameras. And you're like, how'd you only schedule that for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? So I think the misconception of what is real and what is, I guess, a dream in their minds,
Yeah.
reality versus, their expectations versus this is reality.
Yeah. I mean, when I sit with our evaluation committee for when people submit requests for grants that we give, they're $1,000 and $2,000 grants, so they're certainly not going to break a budget or anything like that. But the one piece of feedback that we get that the evaluation committee gives the most is it's just an unrealistic schedule. And if someone's planning on spending $10,000 and you look at their schedule and it's completely unrealistic, the first thing they say is their budget's going to double because they don't have a realistic schedule. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If somebody walks out of your class with one thing that they remember from you teaching, what's that one piece of advice for first-time producers?
Be fair to everyone.
Mm, that's great.
I would say, because not everyone knows as much as but there might also be people that know way more than you do about camera, lighting, or whatnot. So I would say just be fair to everyone. Be cool, be calm, be collected, and look at it as almost like a hospitality experience. So as a producer, when you're on set, you need to be a host. You need to shake hands. You need to thank people for coming in the morning. You need to know something a little bit about them. So if they're from Pittsburgh, you know, I would automatically go in, hey, I've held the two World Series trophies in my hands because that guy was my neighbor growing up, right? John Galbraith, whatever. But find out something about them. And if I treat them fair, then they're going to treat me fair. Right.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that you didn't give a piece of filmmaking advice. You gave how to be a good human being advice. And I think that's great. I think that's great. How do you balance creativity with logistical and financial demands of a production?
Well, that is a really great question, John. On Zombie Apache, it was, the general store. Like that was something my director and great buddy Charlie would not take no you wouldn't take no for an answer. It was, I'm getting this general store, that's the one I want, no exceptions. And logistically, if you're shooting 60 or 70 miles away from this location and you wrap up a 12.5 hour day, and then you have to pack everyone up and then drive to the next location to a hotel, get 6 hours worth of sleep, get up, shoot another 12.5 hours, tear down, and then drive back to the hotel we were staying in, 36 hours before. That kind of affects you logistically and budget wise, but also why budget wise? Because not only are you paying for people to sleep in one location the whole time, but now I have to pay for them to sleep in another location for like
Mhm.
6 hours. And sometimes they only have doubles, right? And you're like, look, we're in here for 6 hours. So, we're on an independent film. I'm going to throw two people from the camera team in the same room. But sometimes people complain because they're divas. So you have to make the decision. Do I upset this person and tell them quit being a diva, or do I just get the extra room for anyone that wants an extra room because they're divas for 6 hours, even though I'm paying for them to have a nice house at the original location, and I've stocked the refrigerator with food and things like that. So you have to learn how to, where do you say no and where do you say yes, but also, is it worth driving logistically to that location for the general store and losing sleep and spending extra money just to get the shots? And in my case, the answer is yes.
There you go. What's a common misconception that you think people have about filmmaking that you try and help them learn, whether it's students or recent graduates?
You're gonna get rich. You get, like there's only so many spots. Only so many people are getting rich off this stuff. Now you might get rich off of 10 movies, but you're not going to get rich off your first movie. You may not make even any money off your first movie. And some people believe that it's a lot easier than it really is, right? And if you want to make a good movie, because there's a lot of movies out there, I'm sure my 25-year-old nephew can make a movie and it would probably have edit points and stuff like that. But if he's never done it before, he's probably not going to be as good as the movie that I execute. Why? Because I know how to do it.
Mhm.
And again, practice makes perfect.
There you go. Andrew, as you mentioned, your work has spanned producing, camera department, production operations, and other areas. How has wearing all those hats changed the way you approach producing in terms of making sure that you are as efficient as you possibly can?
I know what the budget's for. I know usually what gear we don't need. I know how to not freak out in situations. And if someone doesn't show up, then I know how to step in and do the sound. I know how to set up C stand. I know how to operate a camera. For example, on Zombie Apache, yes, I'm the producer and line producer, but I also had to get thrown into it for a bit scene because someone didn't show up. And because of that, I mean, we also had about $250,000 already spent so far on this. But my director and first AD came up to me, 12 hours before we started day one of filming and said, we need you to be the actor. So I guess that prepared me to do that, to be able to step in and be like, you know what? You've been around it so long, you might as well just do it. And, you know, our fans out there watch Zombie Apache available on Prime, then I play Wally Bar.
There you go. Well, good segue mentioning where they can find some of this. Where can our listeners, besides taking your class at Full Sail, of course, where can listeners hear more from you about you, learn more, see your credits, all these type of things? Tell us where we can find more.
Well, let's see. I'm available on Instagram. If you want to message there, it's andrewbyrd.pga. And then, of course, LinkedIn at Andrew Byrd. And then my website at andrewbyrd.org. And then, if you want to look at some movies on Prime or some of the other streaming services, there are Dino Gator, Zombie Apache, Blight, and then coming soon, we'll have a movie called Semicolon, which will be available on Prime, as well as I have some festival shorts that we're working on, and of course, IMDb.
So always staying busy. Good to hear. So, Andrew, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for taking time to be with us today and share your stories and your expertise. We appreciate you being on the Film Florida podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org and like or follow our social media pages. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.26 for our 2026 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.